It all started on an ordinary day. The kind of day you think will pass by like any other, with no hint of the extraordinary, the unimaginable, or the life-altering. But life, as I would soon learn, has a way of shattering the mundane in an instant, revealing things you never thought were possible, and in some cases showing you truths too vast to comprehend. I was just going through the motions, like most people do, checking off the tasks on my to-do list. Everything felt routine, predictable. I had no idea that within a few hours my reality would be flipped upside down, and I would see beyond what I thought was possible. I would see the truth about the world, the truth about life, and most shockingly, the truth about technology and how it would change everything we knew. I never thought something like this would happen to me. I had heard stories, of course, stories of near-death experiences, of people who'd passed to the other side and returned with mind-boggling tales of what they saw. But I always thought it was just that, stories. It wasn't until I found myself in a place between life and death, hanging in the balance, that I began to understand the deeper forces at work in the world around us. It started like any normal day. I was busy, distracted by the noise of my own life, my job, my obligations, the little stresses that build up over time. But there was a nagging feeling in my chest, an unease I couldn't shake. At first, I thought it was nothing, just another symptom of the overwhelming pace of modern life. But then it hit me. Suddenly, with no warning, I felt a sharp pain in my chest, so intense that I couldn't breathe. My vision blurred, and the world seemed to spin out of control. I tried to steady myself to breathe through the pain, but it only grew worse, more overwhelming, until there was nothing but darkness. In that moment, I wasn't afraid, at least not in the way you'd expect someone to be when they know they're about to die. I didn't feel panic or regret or sorrow for the things I'd left undone. I just surrendered. It felt almost peaceful, in a strange, unsettling way. I felt detached from my body, as though I was no longer tied to the physical world. It was as if I was floating, weightless, in a void of pure darkness. And then it happened. I wasn't sure if it was seconds or hours that passed. Time no longer seemed to matter. I felt myself being pulled, no more like guided by something unseen, something beyond comprehension. It wasn't a force of fear or chaos. It was calm, gentle, but insistent. I had no control over where I was going, but I knew instinctively that I had no choice but to follow. The darkness around me began to shift, and slowly I saw it. A light, soft, gentle, and overwhelmingly powerful, beginning to break through the blackness. At first, it was just a speck, a distant gleam, but as I was drawn toward it, the light grew, expanded, filling my vision with warmth. It wasn't harsh or blinding like the light of the sun. It was different. It was a presence, a force of pure love, of understanding, as if this light knew me better than I knew myself. As I approached, I could sense the weight of something immense ahead of me. I wasn't sure what it was, but I felt it. Its gravity, its truth. Something was waiting for me at the end of this journey, and I knew somehow that I was meant to see it, to understand it. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that the revelation I was about to receive would change everything I thought I understood about life, death, and the very world we live in. What I saw next was beyond anything I could have imagined. I was about to be shown a truth that would shake the foundations of my existence. And it all had to do with the technology we so blindly worship, the devices we carry, the systems we trust, and the future we're unknowingly building, a future where we might not even recognize ourselves. This was not just about death. It wasn't just about life after life. It was about something bigger, something that had been growing, quietly, silently, behind the scenes. And now I was about to learn the truth that most people would never even suspect, The pain that gripped my chest was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It wasn't just physical. It was as if my body was rebelling against me, rejecting the life I had lived, the choices I had made, and everything I thought I understood. My breathing became shallow, desperate, each inhale a fight against the pressure that seemed to suffocate me. My vision blurred, the edges of the room turning to dark smears, as if the world itself was fading away. I remember my legs buckling beneath me, and I collapsed to the floor. The last thing I heard was the frantic voice of my colleague, calling my name, but it felt like it came from miles away. Everything went silent, and then it all stopped. For a moment, I wasn't sure if I was still alive or if I'd already crossed over. There was no pain, no dizziness, just a profound stillness, a void where the noise of the world no longer existed. I couldn't feel my body anymore. My limbs were heavy, foreign, as though I wasn't connected to them at all. It was almost peaceful in a way. But there was something else, a subtle presence that hung in the air. It wasn't a person, at least not in the way we think of people. It was more like an energy, a force, or even an awareness. I could feel it pressing against me, not in an aggressive way, but in a way that let me know it was watching, waiting. The more I focused on it, the clearer it became. It was not human. It was something else, something ancient, something vast. For the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to feel small, to feel insignificant in the grand scheme of existence. And yet there was no fear, just understanding, as if this moment was inevitable, as if I was meant to be here. I tried to move, to stand, but my body refused to respond. It wasn't a matter of strength. It was as if I no longer had any control over it. Panic started to creep in, and I fought against the feeling, but there was nothing to fight. I was powerless. There was nothing I could do. And then, just as suddenly as it all began, I felt it. A pull, soft, gentle, but impossible to resist. It wasn't like falling or floating. It was more like being guided, as if someone or something were gently steering me, leading me somewhere I couldn't see, but somehow knew was important. I tried to look around to see where I was, but there was nothing. No walls, no ceiling. Just an endless space of dark nothingness. It wasn't empty, though. It was dense, thick with something I couldn't explain. It felt like I was suspended in a realm outside of time and space. It was as though I had been removed from everything I knew, removed from reality itself. The pull continued, and I had no choice but to follow. I couldn't see anything ahead, but I could feel it. There was something, or someone, drawing me forward, and with each passing second, the sensation grew stronger. My instincts told me to resist, to fight whatever was guiding me, but my body, or whatever was left of it, my essence, couldn't do anything but surrender. As I moved forward, the darkness around me began to shift. It wasn't gradual. It was as if the void that had surrounded me suddenly split apart, revealing a tunnel. At first, it was just a flicker, a tiny speck of light in the distance. But as I was drawn closer, the light began to grow, expanding rapidly, flooding my vision. It wasn't the warm, comforting light I had imagined it to be. No, this light was something else. It was intense, overwhelming, like the very essence of existence itself was pouring through it. It didn't hurt, but it was almost too much to bear. The deeper I went into the tunnel, the more I could feel something shifting within me. The feeling of being me, of being connected to my life on Earth, began to fade. I wasn't sure if I was losing myself or finding something new, but it was as if my very identity, my consciousness, was no longer tied to anything familiar. It was as if I was being stripped away, layer by layer, until all that remained was pure awareness. The sounds around me were strange. At first, there was only silence, then whispers. Quiet at first, barely audible like the rustling of distant thoughts. But they grew louder, clearer, until it seemed like hundreds, thousands of voices were speaking in languages I couldn't understand. There was no fear in their voices, no anger, just a hum, an ancient hum that felt like it had existed long before humanity ever walked the earth. The voices surrounded me, pressing in from all directions, filling my mind, my being, with an overwhelming sense of knowing. I wasn't sure what I knew, but it was there, inside me, like an unshakable truth. The more I listened to these voices, the more they seemed to reveal to me about the world, about existence, and about what was coming. But it was all too much. It wasn't just overwhelming. It was suffocating. My mind tried to comprehend it all, but it was like trying to understand the entire universe in a single breath. The thoughts, the images, the feelings, they all blended together, crashing into one another until I didn't know where I ended, and the voices began. And then it stopped. The voices faded, the light dimmed, and for a moment I was suspended in nothingness again. I didn't know if I was still, alive, if I was dead, or if I had simply passed into something else entirely. But then I saw it. A figure, a being so radiant, so powerful that it consumed everything around it. It wasn't like anything I had ever seen before. It wasn't human. It wasn't even a creature in the sense that we understand creatures. It was pure energy, pure light. I don't know how I knew it, but I felt it deep inside. This was not just any being. This was God. Not in the way we think of God, not a man in the clouds with a beard, but an overwhelming force of love and understanding. It wasn't just light. It was life itself. Every feeling I had ever had, every thought, every moment, every sorrow and every joy, it all made sense in the presence of this being. And then the being spoke. Not with words, but with a presence that filled me completely. It wasn't a voice, not in the way we know voices. It was a knowing, a truth so deep that it pierced every layer of my soul. You're here to learn, you're here to understand, and when you return, you will share what you've learned. The being's message wasn't a question, it was a command. I didn't understand what it meant at the time, but in that moment I felt it. I was meant to see something beyond life and death, beyond the mundane world we know. But what was it? What was the truth that was waiting for me on the other side of this journey? As the being's presence enveloped me, the vastness of its energy became more apparent. It wasn't just light. It was a feeling, an essence that reached deep into the core of who I was. It wasn't a voice, but a message that resonated through every fiber of my being, connecting me to something far greater than myself. Every thought, every emotion, every fear and hope I had ever carried was laid bare in its presence. It wasn't like anything I had ever imagined. I had heard stories about the light at the end of the tunnel, the peace that washed over people in their near-death experiences. But this was something different. The light didn't just surround me. It was me. I felt it in my heart, my soul, in every inch of my existence. It wasn't about comfort or safety. It was about truth, raw, unfiltered, and all-encompassing. For a moment I felt as though I could understand everything. Every mystery of life, every question I had ever asked was there for me to grasp. It was overwhelming. The answers weren't just intellectual. They were emotional, spiritual. It was as though I was seeing the universe not with my eyes, but with my heart. And yet, even in this profound clarity, I couldn't keep up. I couldn't grasp the entirety of what I was being shown. It was as though time itself was unraveling in front of me, and I was but a fleeting moment in an infinite cycle. Then, as if by instinct, my attention was drawn elsewhere. I don't know how it happened, whether I was pulled or whether I simply knew where to look, but there, just beyond the light, I saw a vision of the world. It wasn't a world I recognized, not in the way we think of Earth. It was distorted, twisted, as though the very fabric of reality was fraying at the edges. The world before me was not one of chaos or destruction, but of something far more subtle: control. Everything in this vision was orderly, structured, controlled. There was no freedom. There was no joy. There was only compliance. I saw people, thousands, millions of them, moving in perfect unison. Their faces were blank, their eyes glazed over. They weren't suffering, but they weren't truly alive either. They were simply existing, following the instructions given to them by unseen forces. They moved as if on autopilot, going through the motions of life without ever truly living. And it was then that I understood. The technology that we had embraced so wholeheartedly, the phones, the computers, the artificial intelligence that we hailed as the future, wasn't just an advancement. It wasn't just a tool for progress. It was a mechanism, a trap, a means of control. I watched in horror as I realized how the technology we had trusted so blindly had already begun to manipulate our thoughts, our desires, our very existence. It wasn't the devices themselves that were dangerous. It was what they enabled. They were creating a system of control so pervasive, so embedded in every part of our lives, that we didn't even notice it happening. And then I saw him. He wasn't the leader I expected. He wasn't a dictator or a tyrant, but a figure that everyone trusted. A figure they believed was guiding them toward a better future. A figure they worshipped, adored, and followed without question. But as I looked closer, I saw who he truly was, not in a physical sense, but in the essence of his being. This man, this figure, wasn't just a leader. He was a puppet, a pawn in a far larger game. He was leading us down a path to total subjugation, to a world where free will no longer existed, where people's thoughts and desires were no longer their own. It wasn't the technology itself that was dangerous. It was the unseen hand controlling it, the puppet master pulling the strings from the shadows. And yet, it wasn't too late. The vision shifted again, and I found myself in a place that felt different from everything I had experienced before. It wasn't the light, but something else, something vast, something beyond comprehension. I was no longer aware of time or space. I was no longer aware of myself. I was a part of something greater, something eternal, something outside the realm of life and death. In this place, I felt a sense of oneness, a connection to everything, past, present, and future. I saw how every action, every decision, every thought had a ripple effect that reached far beyond what we could understand. I saw the truth about humanity, about our struggle, about the forces that shaped us, both good and evil. But then, as quickly as it began, the vision faded, and I was pulled back into the light. Not the intense, overwhelming light from before, but a softer light, one that felt more like a return. I felt myself moving, slowly at first, like a leaf drifting on a breeze. I wasn't sure if I was going back to my body or if I was being drawn into something else. But there was no panic, no fear, just a quiet understanding that I had seen what I was meant to see. I began to hear voices again, soft at first, and then louder. I felt warmth around me, the sensation of air on my skin, the subtle pull of gravity beneath me. My body, the one I had left behind, began to return. I could feel my limbs again, but they felt foreign, distant. My thoughts started to align with my body, but they were different, changed. I had seen things that no one else had, and I understood things I could never fully explain. The world I returned to was not the same as the one I had left. Everything looked the same. People were walking, talking, living their lives, but I knew that something had shifted. I had witnessed the future. I had seen the truth about what was coming, and now I had a responsibility, a mission to share what I had seen before it was too late. The technology, the systems, the leaders, and the future we were building, they weren't what they appeared to be. There was a hidden truth, a dark truth, lurking just beneath the surface. A truth about control, manipulation, and the loss of freedom that was coming for us all. But there was hope. There always is. If we wake up, if we see what is really happening before it's too late. And that's when I heard it. The same voice. The same presence that had guided me through my journey. It spoke softly but firmly. You must share this truth. Tell them, before it's too late. As I returned to the world I once knew, a feeling of profound responsibility weighed heavily on my chest. The air felt thicker, as if the veil between the physical world and something beyond had been lifted, and I was now living with the full awareness of what was at stake. I had seen the truth, a truth that was terrifying yet liberating, and it felt as though I had been given a second chance, not for myself, but for the world around me. It was like waking up from a deep sleep, only to realize that the world you had been living in was not real at all. Everything seemed familiar, yet I felt like a stranger in my own life. The same faces, the same places, but the profound understanding of the power technology had over us, the way it was silently shaping our thoughts, our desires, our actions, was impossible to ignore. The vision I had experienced was not just a warning, it was a call to action. It was a wake-up call for everyone, myself included, to see beyond the surface of the world we were creating. The future, as I had witnessed, was not one of peace and prosperity as we've been led to believe, but one of control and manipulation. A world where our freedoms were stripped away without us even realizing it. But there was still time, there was still a choice to be made. And that choice wasn't going to come from the outside world. It wasn't about waiting for someone to save us or for some external force to come and make things right. The choice was ours. It was up to each of us to wake up, to recognize the control that had been quietly infiltrating our lives, and to take a stand before it was too late. I couldn't shake the words I had heard in the light. Tell them before it's too late. It wasn't just about technology, it was about awareness. It was about recognizing the power we had as individuals to break free from the systems that sought to control us. The truth had been revealed to me, and now it was my responsibility to share it, to warn others, even if it meant they wouldn't believe me, even if they couldn't see what I had seen. The journey I had been through had transformed me. It had opened my eyes to the deeper currents of existence, to the hidden forces shaping our world. And now I knew that I had to share this knowledge with the world, to shake people from their slumber, to help them see the truth before it was too late. The future is not set. It's still being written right now by all of us. The choice is in your hands. Will you see the truth and awaken, or will you continue to sleep until it's too late?